as an artist, when you alchemize those bad things, process that pain, and then use it to make new art, that's the art that you're supposed to make. And that's the way you actually connect with people's hearts and minds for real.
Create for No Reason is your weekly dose of inspiration to create what you believe should exist in the world. It's where passion meets craft, and we explore the joy of the creative process and building a meaningful body of work. This is such a fun episode. I was joined by Justin Shiels. He is an artist and a speaker. He is such a creative. In fact, I love this. He says, every part of me wants to be a small part in spreading a little more light, a little more joy, and a little more creativity. That's why I've dedicated myself to launching and growing meaningful projects that create significant impact for the world. And that is what he is doing every day through all of his work, through his poetry. He's got a workbook, he has a newsletter. And that's what we talked about. In this episode, you're going to hear from a creative that is really getting in the reps, doing the work. I just know that you're going to get some type of inspiration and some ideas that are going to push you in your creative project to move it forward, to start sharing a little bit more. I feel like if you're not sharing your work, this might be the episode that really encourages you to start putting some of your art into the world for others to see and appreciate. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be so much fun.
I know. This is the best. I mean, look, we're talking about creativity, which is the best topic. And you are an expert in this area because, man, you create a lot of stuff.
I am a prolific artist. I don't know what it is, but when I'm able to tap in and touch the muses, I feel like I'm the type of person that will make art endlessly if I had the opportunity. And so I'm super excited to talk to you and your audience about how people can tap into their inner muse and make more art, you know?
Yeah. Well, you just said you would if you had the opportunity. You're already creating so much. I mean, I don't know how much more you could create. Like, you're putting so many things out into the world. It's so beautiful. Like, your messages are incredible. And actually, since you mentioned muses, I'm curious, do you believe in muses? Like, what's your view and take on muses? Like, what does that look like for you?
Okay, I don't want to get too metaphysical, but here's my general thought, okay? Art should be a practice that you do every single day. And the reason that art should be a practice, especially if you consider yourself a creative person, is because it is a way for you to connect with, like, if you believe in God or source or energy, right? And so my working theory is that if you commit to the daily practice of making something every single day, then you will get gifts from God or the universe or whatever. And those gifts come in the form of ideas. And so the people that make their ideas real get more, better, good ideas. And so that is the gift of daily creation, is better ideas.
I love that. That's really beautiful.
Straight off my brain right now.
You need to write that. Jot it down. That's something. So let's talk a little bit about what you create on a regular basis. Now, you do this full time now.
Yeah.
But you haven't always been a full-time creator. You have, like many of our listeners, you have a full-time job, you're going into the office, which really prohibits a lot of people from creating, but not you. Let's start with, when did you start creating as consistently as you create now?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. So some context that I like to give people: I started as a graphic designer and was able to work my way up over many years to becoming an art director and then becoming a creative director in advertising. So I had, like, what seemed like to many people that kind of flashy creative leadership job that was fun and exciting, and have had the opportunity to make a variety of different types of content for businesses, right? So it's come to fruition as making social content, making short form videos, but then also doing some commercials that were broadcasted on TV, which was actually my goal of kind of becoming a creative director in advertising. So I have this busy creative job that's, providing me with this full-time living, but I also need to be able to express myself creatively. And so in 2016, right when I started my position as a creative director, literally my first my first year as a creative director, I was like, I need to do something that is just for me, that allows me to express my creativity to the world. And so I bought an iPad Pro, and it was life changing. Honestly, I got this program called Procreate that I'm sure many people in your audience are aware of. And it changed everything about my creative process, because before I'm like drawing things by hand and then scanning them and then tracing them in Illustrator. And all of those steps are removed to where I'm just drawing directly on the iPad, exporting it, and then sharing it. And so I started with a 30-day Instagram challenge where I drew an original inspirational message every single day for 30 days. And that was my way to learn how to use my iPad Pro, but also to be able to create things that I was personally passionate about.
First of all, I love the 30-day challenges. I love when people challenge themselves to do something like that. And that is creating in public, which I think for some people, it's very overwhelming because they're, fear, especially when you're starting something new and you're learning and developing a new skill or putting something out to the world. It can be scary for people to do it if they work on it for a long time, but especially if you're doing some type of a challenge. So what advice would you give? Because I know you coach a lot of people in this space too. So what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about doing some type of a creative challenge, but it stops them, that kind of perfectionism stops them from actually creating and sharing?
Oh my goodness. Number one, perfectionism is a trap. Let it go. Nobody is perfect. Nobody wants you to be perfect. Nobody cares if you make mistakes. Like, genuinely, no one cares. Uh, that's the first piece. I think the second thing that personally worked for me is affirmations. I have always struggled with my inner critic, like I think many artists do. And one of the best tools for battling my inner critic is using positive affirmations as a tool to like build my confidence. And so one interesting thing that I noticed in my process of using positive affirmations was that I had some weird, like, I didn't feel like I was worthy of being seen. I didn't feel like I was worthy of taking up space. And so I over and over again would repeat these two affirmations. The first one is, I am worthy of anything that I can imagine. And then the second one is, I deserve to take up space, right? Those two phrases, repeating them over and over and over and over again, eventually they stuck and I started to believe it. And I feel like once I started to believe it, I was able to put myself out there a little bit more and a little bit more. And so kind of similar to what you were describing, initially when I was posting, it would be like, oh, I'm only going to post literally what I consider my best work, right? But the beauty of a 30-day challenge is you won't have your best work every single day. And instead, the commitment, which is a meaningful one for creatives to make for themselves, is I'm going to show up every single day, all the different versions of me. So that means I'm showing up when I'm angry. I'm showing up when I'm annoyed. I'm showing up when I'm tired. I'm showing up when I'm happy. But the process of doing that every single day for those 30 days allows people to see that you do this thing, right? So I do the 30-day Instagram challenge and post all these inspirational messages. And what's cool about it is they reflect who I am in that moment, or like what I was thinking about, in a way that isn't like that saccharine, sweet, kind of traditional positive affirmations that people post posted during that time period, they have like a little bit of edge and a little bit of personality because I'm sharing my authentic self for that day with my audience.
I love those two affirmations. And I love that you shared that you're not going to put your best work out every day, because I think it's so, when you're creating anything, you want it to be beautiful. It's almost like when people talk about writing a poem or a book, you want to sit down and you want it to be a masterpiece. You want it to be perfect, right? But like it takes time it takes time to get there. So I think it's so cool is while you have an opportunity to work on long form things like you've done a workbook and you're working on a lot of things that that develop over time. But then that doesn't mean that you can't create small little pieces of art and put them out into the world. And what that does is it feels like when you're putting small pieces out into the world, you get to take the feedback that you're getting and then use that in your long form content. So it's like you can do both of those things. The more that people create, you just kind of, I always say like you get in the reps, right? Like it's getting in the reps. Every time you do something, it's getting in the reps. I said I was going to maybe share this poem and you brought it up, Justin, permission. And I saw, so Justin Made That is your handle on Instagram, which is like the cutest name. Justin Made That. And I definitely encourage people to go check it out because you do share really wonderful messages. And there was this poem that is so beautiful. So I'm going to read it. You've been waiting, literally holding your breath for a stamp of external approval. But here's the truth. Their green light was never the key to your joy. You don't need their permission to take up space, to shine, to be the main character, to be the masterpiece. Because even if you don't believe it yet, you already are. Turns out the only approval you needed was your own. So beautiful.
Thank you for reading that. That made me feel very good.
How does it feel to hear someone else read your work?
I have not had that experience yet, and that felt very good. Thank you.
Me so happy. Yeah, I think it's so special when people that are touched by your work, they read it back to you or they say what you said and you're like, wait a second, did I write that? Did I say that?
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. So talk a little bit about, so you started creating as you were working full time, and now you have developed this incredible body of work. You have a newsletter and you do these greeting cards. Your full-time gig really is creating these greeting cards. So can you talk through like what was the first big thing that you created? Was it the newsletter or the workbook, or take us through your creative steps?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So why I love this question is because I feel like some people like to lean into the mystique of being a creative professional, and I'm a Taurus. I am practical, and I like to give people the play-by-play in like reality. And so let me give y'all some context. I moved to Austin, Texas in 2019. And specifically, I had the goal of saving a ton of money so that I could buy a house. And I was working at a really vibrant, fun agency doing B2B work, but kind of felt like I wanted to be able to use the skills that I was gaining at this agency in order to spread positivity in the world, right? And so this comes after that 30-day Instagram challenge that I mentioned previously. I started my email newsletter. It's now called Good Morning Sunshine, and I send it out every single week. It's just like different images that I made, poems that I've written, or little write-ups about ideas on how to live a happier, healthier life, right? And so I started that email newsletter in 2019 while I was working full-time. And what was really useful about this for me is that an email newsletter is a running deadline. So it means every single week, no matter what, I'm responsible for at least doing one illustration and making one poem. And that is like the bare minimum what I have to create every single week. And so it held me accountable and also allowed me to continue to grow and change over time. Okay. So while I'm doing this email newsletter, I would very frequently include like small journal prompts to kind of help people reflect on something that I had written. And one of my subscribers reaches out and is like, "Hey, I really like your journal prompts, and I've been trying to collect them as a Word document so I can fill them out." And it was like, okay, light bulb moment. Listen to the feedback that people give you. I need to put out a workbook. And so I put out the first version of my workbook. At the time, it was called the Vision Workbook. And then I published it again a couple years later as the Reset Workbook. And I self-published it and was able to sell, let's say, around 1,000 copies. I said this earlier. One of the biggest gifts of putting content out consistently is that when people see your work, they're able to give you feedback. And so, like, I put out the book, and I knew that there were some things that I wanted to change, but I got some really useful feedback on how to make it even better. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take this feedback and I'm going to put it out another time. But before I even had the chance to do that, another email subscriber that happened to work at a large publishing company said, "I want to share this book with my boss. I think they might be interested in giving you a book deal." And it happened, right? I ended up having an editor reach out to me specifically. They had purchased my self-published version of the Reset Workbook, and they were like, "There's some room for improvement here, but we think this is a really interesting title, and we'd like to publish it next year." And so I was fortunate enough to start with, like, a nice rough draft of a thing. And then I worked with the publishing company to build out a beautiful full color rendition of my original idea that had more illustrations, better questions, and just was a little bit more thoughtful all the way around. And so I saved up all this money. I was trying to buy a house in Austin. And because of the pandemic, there was a lot of challenge in purchasing a home here. And so I, being the ridiculous person that I am, I am just going to quit my job and take a year off of work. And I called it my year of rest and relaxation. And in that year of rest and relaxation, I rewrote the Reset Workbook and just committed to making a variety of random art projects. The second project that I did during that time period that was pretty successful for me was building my Joy Bombs affirmation card deck. And so, like, those affirmations that I mentioned earlier are part of that Joy Bombs affirmation card deck as well. And so I am, like, kind of living my dream life, right? Like, I'm writing a book, I'm creating content regularly. I did a group coaching program during that time period as well. But I ended up, unfortunately, at a routine health visit. They had some concerns that I might have cancer. And so it was like just a really sobering experience, because it's like I'm living in alignment, I feel like, but I also have this, like, significant health scare that I have to address as immediately as possible. And so I ended up getting a full-time job again after my year of rest and relaxation at a company that focused on nonprofits and public health and essentially spreading good in the world. So I get this job at this company. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited. Like, this is going to be the best job ever. I get to use all the things I learned along the way to, like, build campaigns that are actually useful for the world. And I actually want to say this part because it is really important to me. While working at this company, I was able to do some really fun projects. Specifically, and it's fun is a weird word because they're heavy topics, but I was able to work on a fentanyl prevention campaign for teenagers. That was incredibly effective. We made a variety of social pieces that were really effective. I did a suicide prevention campaign, and mental health is really important to me because I feel like, especially in the Black community, going to see a therapist is like still sometimes controversial. And so like I love the fact that I have the ability to be a mental health advocate in the community and in the world. And then while working there, I also got to do this really awesome heroin prevention campaign for older Black adults. And so like while at this agency, I'm able to like kind of do these really instrumental, interesting campaigns that actually do create public good. But behind the scenes, the agency was trash and the people were really mean and toxic and not kind. And it was mind-boggling because it's like I'm a good person trying to do good in the world, and most of the people on my level at that agency are trying to do the same thing. It felt like everyone was like, we just want to do good in the world. We want to make things that are interesting and fun. But like the way that the company was structured or something about the way that it was founded, there was a misalignment between like how things operated, how people were treated, and it felt very, very disconnected from the way that I want to lead my life. And so I go through this really toxic experience, and like it was hard and challenging and frustrating and led to many, many, many tears. But I think one of my superpowers, and this is one that I have been working on for quite some time. When something bad happens, if you allow yourself to feel the pain, like genuinely feel it, and like process through the pain, like don't get stuck in it, you can alchemize it into better art. And I feel like that was a key learning from this experience at this toxic work environment, is that it's like bad things happen to everyone over the course of your life. But as an artist, when you alchemize those bad things, process that pain, and then use it to make new art, that's the art that you're supposed to make. And that's the way you actually connect with people's hearts and minds for real, you know?
Well, yeah, that as you're saying it, it reminds me so much of comedians, because so many comedians talk about how most of them have all this pain, and this is why they get up on stage and they have all these issues. And it's what's interesting too is I had someone on the show, we were talking about the writing process, and she believes that writing should not be hard and we should not have to go through the pain. And so it's interesting to hear everybody's ideas, but you hear people like Kurt Vonnegut, or you read other people's work, and when you study other artists, so many of them do talk about the pain that they had to go through, but you use that in order to create your work. And it also reminds me of Buddha, like that story about Buddha under the Bodhi tree, where I invite my emotions to come sit, have tea with me. Anxiety, or if you're feeling frustration or anger, it's like, don't try to push it off. Just invite it in, like, here, join me for tea. And then you have some tea and then move on your way and leave. And then you get to take that experience. And so it's interesting to see how people use the experiences, all the experiences, right? You've got the pain, joy, love, everything that happens. I mean, look, so what are so many poems written about?
Yes.
Love, right? Like, we want to write about love because there's so much joy, but there's also so much heartache and pain involved.
I feel like you hit the nail on the head. It is being able to tap into all of those feelings. And I actually am moving into a new space in my creativity in general. And so, like, in many ways, now that I have alchemized that pain, I feel as though I agree with your previous guest, which is I am in my joy era. I am in my let's have fun era. I am in my let's be wild and free and sometimes chaotic. Let's say the wrong thing. Let's do the wrong thing. Like, that's where I'm existing right now. And a lot of it is tied to allowing yourself. I love that you brought up the Buddha, because it's like allowing myself to just like sit with it and like allow whatever comes to work through me. That is a new level of creation and a new level of freedom that I feel like has come with quitting that toxic job. Honestly, it's like, oh wait, I can have fun all day if I want. And so
But I think the key for people to really recognize, because there is a lot of advice like follow your passion and do what you love, right? Like, yes, but I also think because you created a practice that supports the work that you're doing. And it's awesome what you talked about. I love that you talked about the newsletter, because Justin, I'm going to be honest, I had a newsletter and I agree with you in the sense that it was a deadline. I had to get it out every Sunday and I was really enjoying it until I didn't, until it became something that I felt like, oh my gosh, I have to get it out. And then it has to be a certain way. I was really just sharing my ideas. It was almost like a blog post or almost like a journal entry type thing. And I was sending it out and I loved doing it and I got great feedback. But then it became, I didn't feel like writing all of that maybe, or maybe not writing it, but maybe not sharing it. Right. Because if you write and share something, there's a different level of editing. And what does this mean? You want it to be good. And then I stopped and I thought, okay, well, who's to say that I can't still send out a newsletter and it's not a long form content?
No.
It's sharing my podcast. It's writing a little vignette. It's writing a poem. It could be whatever I want it to be. And then if people don't like it, they can unsubscribe. And then if some other people that I find, so I love that you discovered with the people that were following you. I mean, they gave you the data that you needed in order to create something else. And that's what I love about the creative process is when you create and produce work and other people are sharing it or talking to you about it or reaching out to you and saying, oh my gosh, I really loved this. You're like, oh, wow, I had no idea this is how the person consumed it. And then it's giving you more and more ideas. Oh my gosh, it's your muse. It is your muse. It's people that are now sharing the good ideas or at least inspiration for you to come up with those new ideas. And so you have to do, but that, it takes consistency. It takes creating. It takes, as you were talking about that, being in that place, that's such a joyful place to be when you're literally just creating for joy and there's no attachment to how many likes is this going to get? Who's going to say something about this? Is this going to be the thing that really blows up? When you have no attachment to that, it becomes easier to create regularly.
Yes. That is 100% true. I'm in a cohort with a group of other kind of paper product designers. It's really incredible. It's led by Lisa Congdon and Emily McDowell, two really well-known artists. Really thankful that they decided to invest so much time and energy in a group of people of color that want to make paper products, essentially. So thankful. But one of the funny things that pops up is everybody's over Instagram right now. And I feel like a lot of artists are like, I don't want to make content. Like, that's not really my jam. I just want to be able to share my work. And the radical thing is you can share your work. Nothing is stopping you from sharing your work. I think the reason people aren't enjoying it is because they were getting these huge dopamine hits from getting tons of likes on their work. And now that you're not getting as many likes on your work, it's not as fun. But I decided relatively recently, I'm just posting things that I like. And if people respond to it, they respond to it. My goal is not to go viral. Who cares? Doesn't matter to me. And instead, I'm just going to post a couple times a day and I'm posting whatever I made most recently. That is liberating and freeing and allows people to see the things that I care about. And I'll be honest, engagement is not high, right? But it doesn't matter. Like, it genuinely doesn't matter, And so I use it as a tool to encourage me to continue making, which is what's actually important to me.
Where do you like to spend your time? Is there a social platform that you do feel like you enjoy spending time and you're meeting great people and sharing your work and you find it really beneficial?
Yeah. So, okay, I'm all over the place. So, Instagram is actually my favorite place to share a mini collection of work. And so, like, if I've made a few different illustrations, I love posting those as just like a carousel with like an explanation on what I created. That's fun to me. I also very frequently will share just like a really short, easy to create reel. I try to make my reels in app now, which is new for me. But I do that because then it only takes like 5 to 10 minutes and then it's done because it's like,
The way I ever did reels, and I was like over it after 2 months. I was like, just a lot.
I enjoy that. I recently have fallen in love with creating longer form content in video form. And so I will sit down here I'm kind of in the dining area of my home. And so like I'll sit here and like just talk to the camera. I like put a whole bunch of questions that I think people would be interested in me answering. And I just sit and pretend like I'm having coffee with somebody and just answer the questions like a normal human being without a full script created. And like I love doing that. And one of my videos, my video about leaving my toxic workplace, it it went like low level viral. I think it got like 12,000 views in total. And on my YouTube channel, that is like groundbreaking because most of my YouTube videos have gotten like, maybe 200 views. So that's been fun. And then I even like playing on TikTok. Like I think the underscoring thought though is that I see it as just a form of play. It does not have to work. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just like I'm showing up and doing things that I think are fun and interesting. And like as long as it's fun and interesting, I will keep doing it. If something else emerges as fun and interesting that I want to try, I'll do that also, you know?
Yeah. That is even when you talk about it, you can tell that you have a lot of joy in it. And that's when I go back to, for people that are creating for the fun of it, if you really are creating for just the joy of it, if it's not your full-time gig, I understand there's two different ways to look at it, right? If you want to be a social media influencer and you need the numbers and you're trying to pitch products, and that's not what we're talking about. That is a whole different conversation. I know nothing about that world, nor do I really care to, but and that's awesome direction to go in. But for people that literally are just, I want to write poetry, I want to create art, I want to just put things out into the world. You're already creating it. So pick a platform and put it out there. And it doesn't really matter where it goes. It almost feels like, for me, I feel like even on my personal website, I kind of stopped posting as many many blogs and stuff that I used to, but I really just use that as something that I want to look back on that and say, these were my ideas that I had when I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it just beyond. It's kind of cool. I really think so much about your body of work. Like, what is your body of work that you're creating? It's all of the things. It's whether it's the art pieces, it's the writing you do. It's like, for me, it's like I have the podcast and then the newsletter, and I write poetry, and I'm working on a journal. It's like you do all of these pieces, and you keep doing the things you find joy in, and then it leads to curiosity in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
And you also discover new people. So I love that you're part of this collective group, because that's really important too. In your creative process, how important is collaboration and having those creative friends?
Yeah. And ironically, I just remembered that I didn't mention Threads. Threads is super fun right now. It might not be fun forever because you know how once a new social network comes out, the first year of it is fantastic. And then they decide to run it in some weird way by like stopping people from seeing the people that they like to see. But we actually connected via Threads. And I've been very on board with like, how can I connect with as many people as possible on Threads? So like, I'm literally this Sunday going to a creator meetup in Austin, here in Austin, because someone posted, "Hey, I want to meet other creatives in Austin. Let's go to this coffee shop." And I was like, "Okay, bet, I'll go." So I think going back to your initial thought, creativity is not something that you do. I think that creativity is something that you are. And so if you are creativity, why wouldn't you share yourself regularly? And I think that actually makes it more interesting. I think, though, if your goal is to actually get people to see more of your content, you will need to analyze the trends and see like what is happening in the space. But if your goal is just to make work, you can make work and share it, and people will see it. It's not like no one will see it. People will see it. The other thing that popped into my head though is that I've been fortunate enough to just attract creative people into my life at various points. And so I am surrounded by a community of wonderful artists, both digital, I can't say the word, digitally and in real life. And so I'm the type of person where like if somebody messages me, "Yo, you want to go get coffee?" I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." And like we'll talk about the work, and sometimes that will like bud into a new friendship. And so, for example, I made a new friend here in Austin. Her name is Lacole Foots, and she's a wonderful, wonderful poet as well. And one of the things that she does that is so inspiring to me, and I think this could be interesting to your audience, because she doesn't always share her poetry online. Like she doesn't share every individual piece. But what she does is at the end of the year, she takes all of the poetry that she wrote that year and she prints it and makes it into a small book just for herself. And so then she has a record of everything that she created year after year. And I haven't done that yet, but I was like, that is the idea. Like that is the retrospective that every creative needs to do, because it's so cool to be able to go, this is who I was in 2024 and this is who I was in 2025. Like you were saying, you know, like that's how your blog is. But that physical thing is so cool, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And you get to see how well you progressed. Could you imagine? You're such a different poet when you start creating poetry.
mhm.
And let's be honest, I feel like a lot of people when you start, some of the work can feel a little bit trite and because that's just you're getting started and that's what you know. But then when you meet other poets, like I discovered a poetry community on Clubhouse during the pandemic,
Yep.
and I found a lot of really incredible. They were rooms full of beautiful poets, and I learned so much more about the depth of poetry and how to really think about it. And so your work becomes different when you are around other people creating poetry, and when you start reading more, writing more, and I don't know, you just pick up on all these you pick up on other people's styles, and that's going to influence your work, whether you wanted to or not. In fact, one of my favorite books I mention all the time is Austin Kleon's book, Steal Like an Artist.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't know that book? It's like amazing. And you're like, oh, it's like beautiful. And so I love that. I love that idea. And I also, so every year they do a poem a day
Mhm.
Writer's Digest. And so that's my 30-day challenge. I do the poem a day challenge. And Justin, I gotta tell you, I love doing it, but it's a lot. A poem a day is a lot of work. So, I mean, you're like, Kate, I do this every day. But, it can be a lot if you have the idea that it has to be right or perfect or a certain way. But once you let go of that and you're like, oh, it just has to be. That's it.
Mhm.
And that's what I love about creating is you can create something today and then leave it and then pick it up next week. And maybe you love it and you take it into a whole different direction. I can't tell you how many things I've written that I'll write a whole poem or a whole story, and then I won't use any of the whole poem except for the last line of that story.
Mhm.
That becomes the story that I write.
Mhm.
But I never would have come up with that last line had I not written the whole story, which I love and hate at the same time.
I feel like that's just a part of the process, though. Like, I fully am in alignment with the idea of like going back and remixing your work. That's like something that I am personally obsessed with. And so, like, one practice that has been really useful for me, I'll give you three practices that have been really useful for me. Okay. The first one is like make ugly art, and make ugly art as quickly as possible. And so, for example, when I was doing my 30-day Instagram challenge, one of the rules that I used was I have to be able to make a full, complete piece in 30 minutes or less, right? If I set a timer, 30 minutes, whatever I create in that 30 minutes is good enough because that is what I was able to create in that 30 minutes. And I forced myself to post it within that 30 minutes as well. Right.
Wow.
So it was just like, as you mentioned, putting in the reps of getting used to the creative practice first. The second thing that's really useful for me is I go through things that I made in the past every single month. And I go, what would I change to make this relevant to who I am now, to my favorite, like bad pieces, my favorite bad pieces. And that is how I make my most interesting work, honestly, is like, it's that the commitment to allowing things to grow and evolve and change with you, by revisiting them. That is actually the best and easiest way to grow. And I think that's also a part of why I'm so prolific, right? Because it's like I'm making all these 30-minute shit pieces, but then they lead to like future masterpieces because I'm allowing them to be bad at first.
It's the horrible first draft.
Yep.
That writers talk about. Just get it out. All right. Do you have a recommendation, a book recommendation, or a blog that you really love reading, something that really sparks your creativity or that you go back to or that you recommend often?
Yeah, so going back to Austin Kleon, I feel like one of the most useful tools for me is trying to figure out who my favorite artists are referencing, right? And so kind of like you'll go, okay, I like this contemporary poet's work, but then if you like look closely enough or if you follow someone enough, a lot of times they'll leave little breadcrumbs that help you to see like who they were inspired by. They might even literally mention it. And so most recently, I have very much fallen in love with the works of Rumi. I feel like it is really hard to write good short form content. And like in many ways, Rumi did that before short form content existed in the way that it does now. And so like making, using that as a framework for how I make my work has been really, really, really useful. In addition to that, I love like trying to pour over a visual artist like full body of work. And so, for example, right now I'm obsessed with Matisse, right? And like you probably have a few paintings that come to mind when you think of Matisse's work, but Matisse was a very prolific artist. And so like if you go to like an internet archive, you can kind of see all of the works of an artist. And I like to go through and actually like save my favorite ones to my desktop on my computer. And like that will be my source of inspiration. And so like instead of going to Pinterest to find art inspiration or like looking at your peers on Instagram, if you can kind of like go back 100 years or 200 years or 300 years, it actually will end up giving you a better source of inspiration that I think is closer to helping you to create something contemporary that's interesting and new because you're not copying what your friends are doing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it feels more rewarding because you're putting in the work. There's a different essence about it. You can feel it in the work. You can feel when somebody is too closely copying versus when someone was inspired by someone else's work.
Yes.
And that is beautiful. I collect quotes and questions, and you mentioned roommate. I have so many roommate quotes, so I'm gonna share one with you just because I had it up earlier when I was on a call. So I'm gonna share one of his quotes that I love so much, and it's, "As you live deeper in the heart, the mirror gets clearer and clearer."
Woo, that's the truth.
Like, geez, you know it's a good quote when you hear it and you think it's so simple. Like, why couldn't I come up with that? But that's the thing. It probably took, well, I don't know, maybe he's just a brilliant genius, but for most people, like when I talk to authors and there's a line, I'm like, how did you come up with this line? It took a long time to come up with that line. It takes a long time to take that big idea and then turn it into, actually, okay. I'm going to share another quote with you, Justin, by Charles Bukowski, because this is what we're talking about. An intellectual says a simple thing in a hard way. An artist says a hard thing in a simple way.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
That is what we want. All right, Justin, you're so fun. I could talk to you all day, but we got to go create stuff. So my last question that I ask my guests is, what activity can you share with the listener that they can do in 10 minutes or less to live a more creative life?
Oh my goodness. 10 minutes or less. What would I tell you to do? The most meaningful part of my growth and development as a creative thinker, and just honestly as a human being, is giving myself the time to meditate. And it's interesting because, like, everyone says meditate, and then you try to meditate and it's like, this is very, very challenging. So I'm going to tell you what I do that works really, really well for me, and it could work for you. I love to go sit by a body of water. If there's like a pond in your neighborhood, or there's like a park nearby that has a body of water, go sit by the water for 10 to 15 minutes at a time and just allow yourself to see what you are seeing, and work as hard as you can not to think, but instead to just see the water move. And the action of focusing my mind on watching the water helped me to get into meditation, right? Because quieting our brain is really challenging because our world is not set up for a quiet brain right now. It takes a lot of effort. So like jumping into the act of like, I'm going to sit and watch my breath is really hard for a lot of people. But like the visual stimulation of watching water is a way to help you slow down. And that was the first step for me becoming a person that can meditate. And I highly recommend it to everyone.
Awesome. Justin, thank you so much for the conversation. I so appreciate you. Like I said, everyone should go check out Justin on Instagram. Justin Made That is his handle. And then where else can people connect with you and your work?
Yeah, you can find everything I'm creating at socurious.co. And I do have one tiny little plug. I'm doing a fun new expansion of my Joy Bombs project. So I told you earlier about the Joy Bombs affirmation cards. But now I'm doing a new series. It's the fall collection of Joy Bombs. There are 50 cards in the collection, but what I'm doing is I'm selling them in batches of 15, right? And so the idea is that they're kind of like these inspirational trading cards that you can either keep for yourself, give to a friend, or leave for a stranger. And I feel like this is just a fun, meaningful way to share positivity, to get us back to feeling good again as a collective community, because I believe that joy is the revolution. Joy is the revolution fully. And so Joy Bombs are available at socurious.co.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you. This is fantastic. Fantastic.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, go create something.